Her stepmother tried to steal her inheritance. Big mistake. 1. The echoes of old money. The rain had been falling for 3 days when Alina Harrow stepped off the bus and saw Harrowcrest Manor for the first time in 5 years. It stood on the cliff like a beast turned to stone, sharp-angled roofs, tall windows that reflected the gray sky, and walls the color of old bone. Her father used to joke that Harrowcrest had its own climate, and the moment she inhaled the slate-cold air, she felt it. The crispness of the sea, the scent of damp wood, and something else, something she remembered from childhood only as watchfulness. She pulled her suitcase behind her, the wheels dragging over the gravel. Her black coat was soaked, but she didn't care. She'd come because the solicitor's letter hadn't left her much choice. Your father's estate requires your presence. Reading of the will, March 14th. For months had passed since her father's sudden death. 4 months of unanswered questions. 4 months of silence from the woman who had married him in her absence. Isabel Harrow, her stepmother. Alina had met her only once, just months before she left for university. Isabel had been beautiful, in the cold, polished, magazine cover way. Icy blue eyes, a smile too sweet to trust, and an expensive perfume that filled every room she entered like an invasive vine. Alina remembered how Isabel had touched her father's arm too often, laughed too loudly, inserted herself into every moment like a wedge, and how her father had slowly, subtly changed after the wedding. More guarded, more distant, more forgotten. The manor door opened just as she reached the steps. Isabel stood framed in the doorway. She hadn't changed. "Alina," she said, a too bright smile spreading across her face. "My dear, you made it." Alina forced a polite nod. "Isabel."
Come in.
"You must be freezing. Honestly, you should have called for the car. The weather is awful." "I didn't know I needed permission to visit my own home." Isabel's smile tightened. "Of course not. But it's been so long since you've been here, I wasn't sure you'd even want to return." Alina stepped inside without replying. The interiors were the same, mahogany floors, velvet drapes, old portraits. But something was off. The house felt rearranged. The air was colder. The portraits seemed to watch her more sharply. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked too loudly. "Dinner is at 7, Isabel said. "The solicitor will join us tomorrow. I imagine this whole ordeal will be over quickly."
Ordeal.
Alina caught the word like a splinter. "I'll unpack," she said, and headed upstairs without waiting for permission. Because whatever happened in this house, she needed to stay sharp. And she needed answers. 2. The missing pages. Alina's room looked untouched. Same white dresser, same floral wallpaper, same window overlooking the cliffs. But when she opened the drawer of her father's old study desk, she froze. It was empty. Her father kept everything: receipts, letters, notebooks. He was meticulous. That desk was always full. Someone had cleaned it out. She pressed her palm to the wood, feeling a subtle indentation under her fingers.
She bent down.
There it was, a tiny groove in the shape of a half-moon. A secret latch. Her father had shown it to her once, when she was 13. "Always hide the important things," he'd said. She pressed it. The false bottom popped open. Inside was a notebook. But half the pages had been torn out. Her heartbeat slowed in that thick, cold way that felt like the world was rearranging itself. The remaining pages were filled with her father's handwriting, tight, slanted letters that grew shakier as the entries progressed. The first legible page read, "I no longer trust Isabel. Something is wrong. She watches me constantly. Last night I found her in my study reading my private files. She smiled when I caught her. Said she was just tidying." Alina felt her throat tighten. She turned the page. "If anything happens to me, it won't be natural. I need to finalize the will before she..." The next half of the page was violently ripped out. Alina's pulse thundered. And then she heard it. A soft creak in the hallway. She shut the notebook and slipped it into her suitcase, just as the door opened. Isabel stood there, wearing a fresh smile and holding a tray of tea. "I thought you might want something warm," she said. "You were always fond of Earl Grey." Alina managed a nod. Thank you. Isabel placed the tray on the desk, right on top of where the false bottom had opened minutes earlier. Her eyes lingered on it. Too long. Then she looked at Alina, her smile widening just slightly. I'm glad you're home, she said, for however long this takes. And she left. Alina locked the door behind her. Tomorrow she would talk to the solicitor. But tonight, something told her she wouldn't be sleeping much. 3. The will that never was. The solicitor arrived at noon the next day. A small, gray-haired man with round spectacles and a briefcase that looked too heavy for his thin frame. Miss Harrow, he greeted warmly. My condolences. Your father was a good man. Thank you, she said. They gathered in the drawing room. Alina, Isabel, and the solicitor. He opened the briefcase, pulled out a sealed envelope. This, he said, is your father's will, signed 6 weeks before his passing. Isabel eased back into her chair with a smile that was almost relieved. Alina watched her closely. And who inherits what? Isabel asked lightly, like someone discussing afternoon tea options. Well, the solicitor said, clearing his throat, Harrowcrest Manor, the investment portfolios, and the controlling shares of Harrow and Company are to be handed down to. He paused. The room went silent. Miss Alina Harrow. Isabel blinked. Then she laughed. It was a sharp, disbelieving sound. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Mrs. Harrow, the solicitor said. Your late husband was very clear. And what about me? She demanded. You are provided a generous monthly allowance, use of the guest cottage, and a trust fund designated for your long-term comfort. The words hung in the air like smoke. Isabel's jaw clenched. That's absurd, she said. He would never. He did, the solicitor interrupted softly. She shot to her feet, knocking over her chair. This is nonsense, she spat. This is her doing. She jabbed a finger at Alina. She's poisoned you. And now she thinks she can steal my life. Alina rose too. It was never your life. Isabel's eyes glowed with something dark. It was the first time Alina wasn't afraid of her. The solicitor packed his papers hurriedly. If you ladies will excuse me, I'll leave the certified copies with the bank tomorrow. Isabel didn't look at him. She stared at Alina, unblinking, like a predator deciding whether to strike. Then she smiled. A slow, cold smile that had no warmth at all. Enjoy your victory, she said softly. It won't last long. She swept out of the room. The door closed with a thud that echoed through the manor. The solicitor exhaled. Miss Harrow, please be careful. Your father warned me before he passed that things here might become complicated. Complicated. Alina felt the weight of that word. And she knew the nightmare was only beginning. 4. A house of whispered proof. Alina spent the next 3 days searching the manor, retracing every room from her childhood. Something didn't add up. Her father's death had been ruled a stroke.
Quick.
Sudden. But he had been healthy. Always walking the grounds. Eating clean. The kind of man who measured his own blood pressure out of habit. What had changed? On the 4th night, Alina found the answer. In the basement. Behind an old wine rack. A safe. Her father's safe. She recognized the number, his birthday reversed. It clicked open. Inside were documents. Financial statements. Property deeds. Letters from the family attorney dated just weeks before his death. And tucked at the bottom, a sealed envelope addressed in her father's handwriting. To my daughter, if anything happens to me. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter and 2 photographs. She read the letter first. My dearest Alina, if you are reading this, then I am either dead or unable to contact you. And if that is the case, I fear Isabel may have played a part. I married her too quickly. I ignored the warnings. I wanted companionship, and I mistook her charm for love. But I discovered things I cannot unsee. I found documents indicating she has been married before. Many times. Each husband died unexpectedly. Each estate transferred primarily to her. I confronted her. She laughed. She said I would be next. If something happens to me, Do not allow her to control the estate. Do not believe anything she tells you. Find the hidden documents. They will prove what she is. Be careful. She will not let go easily. Your father. Alina stared at the photographs. One was Isabel with a man she didn't recognize, taken years ago. The second was a news clipping of the same man. Local businessman dies of sudden heart failure at 49. Alina's stomach dropped. This was a pattern. A deadly one. She slipped the letter into her jacket and backed away from the safe. When she turned, Isabel was standing at the top of the basement stairs, her face half hidden in shadow. How interesting, she said softly, her voice carrying like silk over glass. You found it. Alina froze. Isabel descended one step at a time. You look just like your father did when he realized what I truly was, she murmured. That delicious mixture of horror and betrayal. Alina's grip tightened on the letter. What did you do to him? She whispered. Isabel smiled. Everything I needed to. 5. The night where everything ends. The storm hit just as the confrontation began. Lightning flashed. The manor lights flickered. The basement seemed to shrink around them. Why? Alina shouted. Why my father? Why all of them? Isabel tilted her head. Men like him don't deserve the empires they build. But I do. I turned their fortunes into something greater. I shaped their power. And when they stopped being useful, she shrugged. I moved on. You murdered them. I freed them from mediocrity. Alina backed toward the stairs. But Isabel moved faster. She lunged. Alina dodged, scrambling toward the wine rack, her heart thundering. Isabel grabbed her wrist. Her nails dug in like claws. You think you've won? She hissed. Those documents are meaningless. The will is meaningless. The only thing that matters is who survives tonight. Alina twisted, slamming Isabel's arm against a shelf. Bottles crashed to the floor, shattering. Isabel shrieked, a sound like a wild animal, and shoved Alina backward. Her head hit the stone wall. The world blurred. Through ringing ears, Alina heard footsteps approaching. Slow. Confident. Poor little heiress, Isabel cooed. Always so trusting. So naive. Just like your father. Alina struggled to stand. She grabbed the nearest object, an old metal lantern. Isabel lunged again. This time, Alina swung. The lantern smashed into Isabel's temple. The woman staggered, slipped, and fell backward, right onto the shattered glass. She screamed as the bottles sliced into her legs and arms. Blood spread across the floor, mixing with the spilled wine like dark ink. Alina ran. Up the stairs. Out of the basement. Down the hall. She heard Isabel screaming behind her. You can't take what's mine. Alina reached the study, locked the door, dialed the police with shaking hands. But the storm had cut the lines. Thunder boomed. Footsteps echoed in the hallway.
Slow.
Dragging.
Vite. Isabel.
Alina grabbed the nearest weapon, a fireplace poker, and waited. The door slammed open. Isabel stumbled inside, her face twisted, her eyes gleaming with madness. You should have stayed away, she hissed. Alina raised the poker. Isabel lunged. They collided. Furniture crashed. Papers scattered. Thunder roared. And then, with a final swing, Alina struck Isabel across the face. The stepmother fell backward, hit the edge of the desk, and collapsed to the floor. Motionless.
Silent.
The storm quieted. Alina stood shaking, the poker dropping from her hand. It was over. 6. The truth after thunder. Hours later, the police arrived once the storm lifted enough for the roads to clear. Isabel was alive, but barely. She was taken into custody, bleeding and unconscious. The officers found everything. The photographs. The forged documents. The letters. The toxicology report from her father hidden in the safe. The coroner reopened the investigation. Isabel was charged with
fraud,
attempted murder, homicide by poisoning, and multiple counts of inheritance theft tied to her past marriages. The case grew national attention. Alina attended every court hearing. She never missed a single one, because she promised her father she wouldn't look away again. 3 months later, Isabel was sentenced to life in prison. 7. A legacy reclaimed. Summer arrived at Harrowcrest Manor. The sea was calm. The halls no longer echoed with dread. Alina renovated the entire estate, modernized the business, restored the damaged rooms, and opened the old study as a memorial to her father. One evening, she stood on the cliff overlooking the ocean. The wind was warm. The house behind her felt like a home again. She whispered, "I did it, Dad." For a moment, she could almost feel his hand on her shoulder. 8. The final letter. Weeks later, while reorganizing the manor library, she found a book with a note tucked inside. Her father's handwriting. For Alina, I always knew you'd be strong enough. I always knew you'd save this family. And I always knew you'd survive her. This home, this legacy, it was always meant for you. My brave girl. Tears welled in her eyes. She closed the note gently, and for the first time in years, she smiled. Because the darkness was gone. The house was hers. The legacy was hers. Her life, finally, was hers.